They say age is just a number, but I've spent over 25 years watching how that number speeds up or slows down based on what people do in the first few minutes of their day. I've seen patients in their 70s recover brain sharpness, regain balance, and even reduce their blood pressure, not through medication or surgery, but by changing how they wake up. And I've seen others, seemingly healthy seniors, walk through my clinic doors confused, foggy, or on the brink of a fall, all because of silent damage they inflicted during the most overlooked time of day, the morning. Not during sleep, not in the afternoon, but in the fragile window of time that begins the moment they open their eyes. The truth is, the first 5 minutes after waking are neurologically and physiologically unique. During those 300 seconds, your body is shifting out of a parasympathetic state. Blood vessels are recalibrating. Brain regions responsible for balance, orientation, and alertness are trying to reboot. And for older adults, that transition is far more vulnerable. The nervous system becomes less responsive with age. Baroreceptors that control blood pressure don't fire as quickly. Circulatory responses lag. This is why seniors so often feel dizzy in the morning or stand up too fast and stumble. It's not just aging, it's biology demanding respect, and when we ignore that demand, we pay with brain function, bone strength, even years off our lives. A few months ago, I treated a 69-year-old woman named Clara who had fallen twice within the span of 1 week. She swore she hadn't tripped. She simply felt lightheaded and collapsed. Her blood work was clean, her heart was strong, but when we mapped out her morning routine, the problem became obvious. She was waking up and sitting up immediately, swinging her legs over the bed without a second thought. What she didn't know is that this action was cutting blood flow to her brain by nearly 30% in the first seconds of motion. Her dizziness wasn't random. It was a sign of orthostatic hypotension, a condition where blood pressure crashes upon standing, and it's astonishingly common among seniors. The fix? Simple but profound. I taught Clara to remain lying down for just 1 extra minute upon waking, to breathe deeply, stretch gently, and only then roll to her side before sitting up. She's had no falls since. Her confidence is back, and she feels more alert throughout the day. There's another piece of this most people miss, what happens inside the mouth. Most seniors brush after breakfast or after taking medications, but almost no one considers what builds up inside the oral cavity overnight. During sleep, saliva production drops dramatically. Bacteria multiply. Inflammatory compounds settle across the tongue and gums. When you swallow first thing in the morning, whether it's water, pills, or coffee, you're sending a toxic load directly into the gut and bloodstream. This isn't harmless. The link between oral inflammation and systemic diseases like heart disease, Alzheimer's, and diabetes is well established. In fact, oral pathogens have been found in arterial plaques and even inside the brains of patients with dementia. I had a patient, James, 72, who came in complaining of bloating, frequent indigestion, and cloudy thinking. He'd been through rounds of digestive testing. Nothing stood out. But when I asked about his first actions after waking, he revealed he drank water immediately upon sitting up, every day without fail. He thought it was healthy. What he didn't realize was that his mouth was a bacterial swamp at that point, and by swallowing immediately, he was delivering biofilm and toxins straight to his gut. I introduced a new routine, oil pulling with coconut oil for 30 seconds upon waking, followed by tongue scraping and a rinse before drinking anything. Within a week, his bloating eased. Within a month, his thinking was sharper. It wasn't a miracle, it was biology, finally supported instead of sabotaged. These aren't isolated stories. I see versions of them weekly. People unknowingly triggering adrenal stress by drinking caffeine too early. Seniors wondering why they feel jittery or crash mid-morning when, in reality, they've disrupted their cortisol rhythms before their body had time to stabilize. Caffeine is not inherently dangerous, but for those over 60, the timing matters more than the dose. The adrenal system is slower to recalibrate in the morning, and when you pour in a stimulant before your blood vessels are even fully dilated, you're setting yourself up for instability. And yet, almost every older adult I speak to starts their day with coffee in the first 10 minutes. No joint activation, no movement, no hydration, just caffeine and the hope it will make them feel human again. The irony is that your body is already giving you the tools you need, if you listen. Instead of rushing to the kitchen, the first step after waking should be motion. Not vigorous exercise, but gentle, targeted movements that lubricate the joints, stimulate circulation, and tell your nervous system, we are awake now, let's prepare. This process isn't just about the joints. It also activates mechanoreceptors in the skin and muscle, sends feedback to the brain, and restores your sense of spatial awareness. These are the systems that prevent falls, improve memory, and maintain coordination. And when we skip this crucial activation, the cost accumulates silently, day after day. I often describe mornings as neurological launch pads. If the systems are calibrated correctly, hydration, circulation, balance, and orientation, you launch into the day with clarity and stability. But if you rush the sequence, everything becomes reactive. Your body spends the rest of the morning compensating for an imbalance you created in the first few minutes. Think about that. Your brain might be working twice as hard to make up for one bad habit you didn't even know you had. And it's not just the body that needs calibration. The brain, particularly in older adults, needs stimulation quickly after waking, or it begins to decelerate. Most seniors start their mornings with quiet. They sit in stillness, drink coffee, maybe read or listen to the news. While that seems gentle and stress-free, it can also leave the brain understimulated, especially the reticular activating system, the circuit responsible for attention and alertness. Left idle, this system begins to downshift, and what follows is slower processing speed, word recall issues, and fatigue. But when we introduce intentional active stimulation, reciting names, solving puzzles, or reading aloud, we trigger regions of the brain that are otherwise vulnerable to atrophy. This daily stimulation doesn't just maintain function, it improves it. A patient named Howard, 76, came in worried he was losing his sharpness. He kept forgetting appointments and felt slower in conversations. No major neurological disease, just disuse. I guided him to spend 3 minutes each morning reading aloud from the newspaper, followed by naming 5 high school friends and recalling one story about each. The change was measurable. Within 2 weeks he felt sharper. Within a month his family noticed he was telling stories again, without pausing to search for words. The brain doesn't need more rest, it needs the right kind of ignition. And the best time to deliver that ignition is when the system is most malleable, the morning. For those of us in medicine, the most heartbreaking diagnoses are the ones that could have been prevented, not with high-tech treatments, but with small, daily decisions. I've watched men and women lose mobility, cognitive speed, and confidence, not because of disease, but because of the habits they unknowingly repeated every morning for decades. As a doctor, it's my job to intervene before those patterns become pathology. And nowhere is that intervention more powerful than in the first few minutes of your day. After hydration, joint activation, and proper brain stimulation, one of the most overlooked elements of morning health is proprioceptive grounding. That's the technical term, but you might know it simply as standing barefoot. Most older adults don't realize that the bottoms of their feet are filled with sensors that communicate directly with the brain. These receptors provide information about balance, gravity, and body positioning. But the older we get, the less feedback we receive, partly because we cover these sensors with socks, slippers, or shoes from the moment we get out of bed. That insulation dulls the signal, and when the brain doesn't get clear input from the feet, it compensates, usually by stiffening posture or relying on vision instead of balance. This is why so many seniors begin to shuffle or hold on to furniture. Their brain is trying to stay upright without receiving proper sensory data. One of my patients, a 70-year-old retired architect named Tom, had experienced several close calls with falls. He hadn't fallen, but he told me he often felt like the room was shifting slightly when he stood up. We ran every test, inner ear, vision, blood pressure, and found nothing conclusive. But when I asked about his mornings, he said he wore orthopedic slippers the moment he stepped out of bed. That one detail changed everything. I had him start grounding, standing barefoot on a firm surface each morning for 5 minutes after his joint movements. Just that one habit helped reset his vestibular system and recalibrate his sense of spatial orientation. Within 2 weeks, the shifting sensation stopped. His gait improved. He said it felt like his brain was connected to his feet again. What people forget is that balance isn't just physical, it's neurological. Your sense of verticality, coordination, and orientation are all controlled by the brain's integration of sensory inputs. When those inputs are dulled or delayed, you feel disconnected from your own body. But when you allow your bare feet to make direct contact with the ground, especially a natural or firm surface, you trigger those receptors. They send critical feedback to the cerebellum and motor cortex, which recalibrate posture and reduce the risk of falling. This isn't theory, it's neurophysiology, and when combined with movement, hydration, and oxygenation, it becomes a full-body morning reset. But balance isn't the only thing that can be rewired in those first few moments. Brain aging, too, responds profoundly to how we fuel our system in the early hours. Most people think breakfast is the most important part of the morning. But the brain has different priorities. It doesn't want food first. It wants clean hydration and neurofuel. I've had patients tell me they wake up groggy, can't think clearly, or need a second cup of coffee by 10 a.m. And when I ask what they eat or drink first thing, I often hear the same answer: coffee and a multivitamin. What they don't realize is that their brain is starting the day dehydrated, depleted, and unprepared. During sleep, we lose a significant amount of water through respiration and perspiration, and because the brain is over 70% water, even mild dehydration has profound effects on its function. The brain literally shrinks overnight. The synapses become less efficient. Electrical activity slows. Without proper hydration, neurons struggle to communicate. In fact, studies have shown that even a 1% drop in hydration can lead to measurable reductions in memory, attention, and processing speed, especially in older adults. That's why the first thing I tell my patients is simple: drink water, real water, room temperature, not cold, before you eat, drink coffee, or take any pills. But water alone isn't enough. The brain also needs electrolytes, particularly sodium and potassium, to fire signals and regulate stress hormones. I recommend starting the day with a quarter teaspoon of pink or sea salt in warm water, with a squeeze of lemon for added minerals. This isn't a health fad, it's neurochemistry. That small mixture supports adrenal function, balances cortisol, and helps the brain transition from its sleep state into focused wakefulness. Even better, it supports the absorption of medication and nutrients you take later on. Add a few bites of fruit, blueberries, banana, or apple, and you give your neurons exactly what they're craving: glucose in its most natural bioavailable form. This is brain-first nutrition, and it makes a difference you can feel. One patient, an 80-year-old retired professor named Helen, had been feeling increasingly confused in the mornings. Her family feared cognitive decline. But after implementing this hydration protocol for just 1 week, she said it felt like her mind was waking up again. The tremors in her hands calmed. She stopped misplacing items. She described the change as subtle but powerful. And that's exactly what the brain needs. Not a sugar rush, not a stimulant, but quiet, consistent support that aligns with its natural rhythm. But hydration and stimulation alone aren't enough. If you truly want to reset the aging brain, you have to activate the deep alertness systems within the first half hour of waking. This is where most people, especially seniors, get it wrong. The first instinct is often to keep things gentle. Breathing exercises, stretching, soft music. These are not bad, but they are insufficient for a brain that's already experiencing age-related declines in stimulation. What older adults really need in the morning is engagement, mental ignition that lights up memory centers, speech pathways, and decision-making circuits. I often prescribe what I call verbal stimulation exercises in the morning. These aren't elaborate. They might include reading a few paragraphs from a book out loud, naming 3 people you plan to call that day, or reciting your to-do list aloud. It may feel strange at first, but there's a neurological reason for it. When you speak out loud, you activate multiple regions of the brain simultaneously: the frontal lobe for planning, the temporal lobe for language, the hippocampus for memory, and the motor cortex for speech. This acts like a neurological warm-up, strengthening the very systems that tend to decline first in aging. I had a patient named George, 75, who began doing this every morning. Within weeks, his speech was more fluid, his recall sharper, and his sense of purpose higher. His wife even told me he's more like himself again. And that's the point. These practices don't just extend life, they restore the feeling of being alive. The last thing I'll say about mornings is this. They shape your internal clock. Every cell in your body operates on a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour cycle driven by light, temperature, and behavior. And the most powerful reset for this system is natural light paired with conscious breathing. When you face sunlight within the first hour of waking and sync it with slow, deliberate breath, you send a cascade of signals to your hypothalamus, the brain's master clock. This tells your body, we're awake, alert, and ready. Cortisol aligns, serotonin rises, inflammation falls, and your mood, digestion, and immune system all benefit. These results aren't theoretical. In clinical trials, seniors who practiced this light breath pairing in the morning saw significant improvements in sleep quality, energy levels, and emotional stability within weeks. They didn't need new prescriptions. They needed new habits. And perhaps the most surprising habit of all, the one that ties it all together, is verbal intention. Speaking one sentence aloud with purpose anchors the day. It's a practice rooted in neuroscience. The words you say when your brain is still waking up imprint deeply on the prefrontal cortex, the center for planning, focus, and emotional regulation. It's not about affirmations or motivational quotes. It's about reminding your brain why today matters. A simple sentence like, "Today I move with confidence," or "Today I protect my mind," can redirect neural pathways. It becomes your compass. Tomorrow, when you wake, try it. Feel the floor under your bare feet. Sip your salt water. Roll your ankles. Speak your sentence, and know this. You are not at the mercy of age. You are at the mercy of what you do in the first 5 minutes of your day. I wish I could tell you that most aging issues are simply the result of time, that memory loss, instability, and mental fog are inevitable. But the truth I've learned from decades of practice is much harder to accept. The body and brain often break down not from aging itself, but from the routines we've conditioned ourselves into, and few routines are more impactful or more overlooked than those first few minutes after you wake up. By the time I meet most patients, the damage has already begun. Sometimes it's subtle, a delay in recalling words, a hand that trembles when lifting a cup, a persistent fear of falling in the shower. Other times it's more devastating, a silent stroke, a fractured hip, a diagnosis that shakes a family to its core. And in case after case, when we trace it back, I find that the breakdown didn't start in the brain or bones, but in the rituals that began each morning. One patient of mine, 78 years old, came in after what he described as just feeling slower. He had no major diagnoses. His labs were clean. But every morning, he told me, he'd wake up feeling like his limbs were made of stone. His brain didn't fully boot up until afternoon. He assumed it was aging, but aging doesn't explain why. Within weeks of changing his morning protocol, his posture improved, his alertness sharpened, and he began walking without assistance. This man wasn't deteriorating, he was deactivated. His body and brain were simply being neglected at the exact moment they were most open to repair and rewiring. Most seniors don't know this, but the brain wakes up in phases, not all at once. The shift from theta brain waves to full alpha or beta wakefulness can take 30 minutes or more, especially with age. And in that fragile window, what you think, say, and do becomes hardwired into your neurochemistry. That's why intention, what I call your mental anchor, matters so much. When you speak a single purposeful sentence aloud right after waking, you're not just talking to yourself. You're activating the prefrontal cortex, the command center of your brain. You're overriding fear, hesitation, and cognitive drift. And you're sending a loud, clear message to your body. This day has meaning. I tell all of my patients to begin each morning with one sentence, just one. It can be as simple as, "Today I will stay steady," or "Today I protect my brain." And I don't care if they believe it yet. I care that they say it, because the act of vocalizing intention triggers neural networks responsible for decision-making, emotional resilience, and long-term goal retention. In clinical studies, we've seen seniors who practice this daily show improvements in executive function, motivation, and even immune responses. The body listens to the brain, and the brain listens to language. If you start your day in silence, without direction, your brain fills that gap with old patterns, fear, fatigue, confusion, but when you give it a sentence to follow, it obeys. And this principle extends beyond just words. The entire morning sequence, hydration balance, stimulation light, acts as a neurological reset button. Most people don't realize that your circadian rhythm, the biological clock that controls everything from hormone release to digestion, is waiting for cues the moment you wake. And if those cues don't come, or if they come in the wrong order, like caffeine before hydration or screen time before daylight, you scramble that clock. The result? Poor sleep, mood instability, blood sugar crashes, and faster cognitive decline. Your body doesn't care how old you are. It cares how well you sync with the systems you were designed to live by. One of my older patients, Judith, had struggled for years with fluctuating energy, poor memory, and midday crashes that left her feeling useless by 2 p.m. Her doctors blamed menopause, blood pressure meds, even normal senior fatigue. But no one had asked her what she did in the first 5 minutes of the day. And what she did was simple but destructive. She'd open her eyes, reach for her phone, scroll through headlines, then head straight for the coffee pot. No hydration, no movement, no light. Her system was being hijacked before it had a chance to stabilize. We rebuilt her morning, one piece at a time. Warm salt water before anything else. Joint activation, 5 minutes of barefoot grounding, reading aloud, light exposure with breath work, a single spoken sentence. Within 2 weeks, the crashes were gone. Within 2 months, she was leading morning yoga at her senior center. Her health hadn't declined. Her rhythm had. The body is miraculous when given the right signals, but it's also unforgiving when neglected. Seniors often assume that aches, imbalance, and forgetfulness are signs of their body breaking down, but I've seen, over and over, that these are just symptoms of a nervous system crying out for regulation. We live in a culture that sells solutions in bottles and prescriptions, but the most powerful longevity protocol we have is the way we wake up. I won't sugarcoat it. Changing your morning routine isn't easy, especially if you've been doing the same thing for 40 years, but the rewards are immediate. I've seen people lower their blood pressure without touching a pill, reduce inflammation markers with hydration and movement, regain memory sharpness by stimulating their hippocampus through spoken language and vestibular activation. These aren't abstract concepts. They're hardwired human biology, simply rediscovered. You don't need fancy tools or expensive programs to reclaim your mornings. You need clarity, discipline, and consistency. Think of your morning like setting the trajectory of a rocket. If the angle is off by even a degree at launch, the result hundreds of miles later is vastly different. Your first 5 minutes set your hormonal tone, your neurological pace, and your emotional stability for the entire day. It's not about perfection, it's about precision. Do the right things, in the right order, at the right time, and watch how your body responds. If I could give every person over 61 prescription that would change their life, it wouldn't be a pill. It would be this routine, not because it's trendy, but because it aligns with how your body is designed to heal and adapt. I've seen it give people their strength back. I've seen it restore marriages where frustration from mental fog had caused tension. I've watched seniors stop fearing mornings and start owning them. And it always begins the same way, with awareness, with the decision to no longer wake up on autopilot. You are not powerless. You are not destined to decline. You are not just getting old. You are waking up into patterns that either build your brain or break it. You get to choose which. That choice begins the moment your eyes open tomorrow. Will you lie still and breathe? Will you move gently and hydrate? Will you speak with intention and face the light, or will you continue to hand those first moments over to chaos? I can tell you from experience, the seniors who thrive into their 80s and 90s are not necessarily the strongest or luckiest. They are the most deliberate. They know that aging is not about what you lose, it's about what you reinforce. And every morning gives you a chance to reinforce balance, clarity, and longevity. You don't need to do it perfectly, but you do need to begin. So if you've ever wondered why your mornings feel heavy, why your energy fades too soon, why your mind sometimes feels like it's drifting further from your control, start here. Don't wait for the next symptom to appear. Don't wait for the next fall or the next foggy morning where the names won't come. Begin now. Begin tomorrow. Even with just one step, speak your sentence, own your rhythm, and remember your body is still listening.